Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final NATS chat of the 2021-2022 season. I'm Kari Ragan, moderator of NATS chats, which are sponsored by Inside View Press, and we are so appreciative of their sponsorship. And I'm thrilled to welcome tonight Alison Crocket and Trineice Robinson-Martin. Thank you, ladies, for joining me tonight.
Thank you. We're so glad to be here.
And it's an important topic. We're going to be talking about Black American music, voice pedagogy, and really helping our NATS members and anyone else who joins our webinar to understand more about this topic and what we need to know. So before we jump into all of that, let us just hear a little bit about your biographies and a little bit beyond the bio, a little nugget of something that we would not read about.
It's always difficult about that. My biography, I did a lot professionally for a while, but I guess kind of beyond the biographies is right now I'm starting my Generations of Vocal Jazz program, where I'm working on teaching jazz to young people, to people between the ages of 6 and 13, as well as elders between the ages of 45 and 85, and trying to put those together. So for the past couple of years, I have had a Generations of Vocal Jazz festival, where what I did is I had an adult jazz choir, one of the few in the country, an adult community jazz choir, Capital City Voices, participate with my GW jive singers, and when I was working in public school, to work with Fillmore Arts Center. And the other year I did it with George and Forrest, where I had all 3 choirs singing their individual music and coming together to create a song, where I arranged it, called A Child Was Born, written by Thad Jones, and putting that all together and trying to make it so that we create a community that understands and feels the joy and pleasure of working with jazz music and singing jazz music. So that's one of the big things that I'm working on right now. So I guess that's beyond the
I love that.
Yeah. And I'm Dr. Trineice, and I am no stranger to NATS and NATS chats, but you know, talk about beyond the bio. We've been working really hard to make sure that we're doing better about putting things in our bio, right? So, but going along with what Alison said, the things that are not in the bio are things that are coming up. Like I'm starting the Soul Ingredients Voice Teacher Training Academy. That's going to be rolling out later this year. So that's a big thing for me. I'm performing. My album came out last year, and just navigating my work at Princeton, and as well as there's a new program that just started in the fall at Long Island University called Rock Nation School of Music, Sports and Entertainment. And I am there also. So I'm making that commute to Brooklyn from the Princeton area. But you know how we do, and still have the Soul Ingredients Voice Studio with other wonderful teachers. Yeah, he's still there.
Tell him I said hey.
I sure will. Sam Newsom, Colin Levin.
Tell Sam Newsom. Oh, that's my favorite. I love that.
So it's a lot of great people, and it's a new opportunity. It's new. It's a new thing completely, and it's probably my first time having so many rappers in my voice studio. So it's been a great season. So beyond the bio is ready for me to explore all of these new opportunities to share my love for teaching and share my love for music.
And Trineice, will your course be online?
Yeah, it's going to be online. So I'm going to do both the combination of pre-recorded, you know, like using like a Kajabi, and as well as regular like weekend intensives. Pretty similar to some that I've already done kind of ad hoc. Like I've done like a Sing Your Soul weekend, and I've done a jazz weekend, but now it's going to be a lot more formalized and saying, okay, this is, instead of me always being the guest somewhere else. I mean, I'm still going to have my home at the LeBetry Institute for Somatic Voice Work at Baldwin Wallace, which is where I do my main teacher training courses. but I'm going to do some other stuff on my own. We were just talking about independent teachers, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to do some stuff on my own, which is going to be, it's really exciting. I just like sharing. So
That's
I'm
wonderful.
glad to have that platform.
Well, and as somebody who has attended presentations of yours, I'm so deeply grateful. You know, yeah, just lots to learn, lots to learn.
I
Let's
appreciate it.
start bird's eye view, then we'll get into the weeds a little bit more. And so I read this quote from Maya Eaglin. Wikipedia is my resource. And she says, every genre that is born from America has Black roots. So I asked both of you, all popular music evolves from Black culture, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Educate us a bit on that. I would love to learn more because I think that's not understood. Would you agree?
It's not understood because we didn't necessarily, our culture related roots have become politicized, unfortunately, rather than just be how things are identified. And so, you know, so the blues is the major popular music that that everything kind of stems from in popular music. There were other music forms. There was operetta, and there was, you know, and opera and various European folk material and things like that, religious music that did merge. And like any culture, cultures go back and forth. But the dominant popular music of the early 1900s was ragtime and blues, coming out of minstrel songs, and minstrel music and minstrel shows were also the precursors to some musical theater as well. So, and vaudeville and all of that stuff. So America is truly a melting pot, but Black American music was kind of the driver of a lot of these things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think, you know, again, the politicized aspect of it often diminishes its value and its contribution. I mean, from spirituals and sorrow songs all the way to the present, and recognizing how strong the influence in American music globally, how Black American music globally just presents itself in popular music. And you're like, wow, that's seeing how it has evolved, seeing how influential it has been, you know, really is what has brought us to saying, okay, you know, I think it's about time that not only are we acknowledging these aspects, but putting it into the pedagogy, when the majority of popular music, or majority of music that's being commerced, if you will, is coming out of a more folk-based style, a folk-based segment, but yet our pedagogy doesn't necessarily support that style of music, or that type of music direction and music making. So, you know, so yes, I'm yes, and yes.
Yes, yes, and yes. And do you find people resistant to that idea? That was suggested to me, and that had not occurred to me, because the first time I heard that many, many years ago, I thought, oh, of course. But
Well,
can you talk about the resistance?
Well, one, so that's also a historical thing as well. So in the past, when jazz became popular, at first, we must, the institutions said we cannot listen to this. This is not good. They did this as well with Black religious music as well. Then they said, well, now it's become popular. Well, now Benny Goodman is now the king of swing. And so these things have happened over and over and over again, up to the present day, where I have still had conversations with people on forums or things who say, no, Black people did not create jazz by themselves, or Black people did, or this is not the the Black music is not the genus of other popular music. I have to kind of say this over and over again to various people who are in educational institutions who are actually teaching jazz and teaching these things. So it's frustrating. But yes, we still have to have these conversations because a lot of this information has not been taught. It has not been shared, and it has been researched. So it's pretty easy to find. It's in my course that I'm teaching for Shenandoah for the CCM Institute. I'm going through Black American roots of the music, of vocal music. All of this stuff that I found to talk about it was all on YouTube. It wasn't like it was hard to find. It was very easy to find, very easy to research and to find resources that are not, conspiracy resources. They are real resources that you could that come from university research, that come from the musicians themselves talking about it. So this is it's easy to find. It's just a lot of people are used to holding on to what they know because it's easier to teach, in my opinion, what it is that you already know.
That's true. And, just going on, and, I'm always coming from the academic side because I feel like I've lived an academic life all of my life, so I recognize certain biases. I recognize that there are certain things about credibility that occurs in the sense of saying, well, how could I possibly justify a contribution by a demographic that I didn't even humanize, until the 20th century, right? So those are those things that we have to recognize that is contributing to any person's ability to say no, that they're a part of this creation, or they are the creator of this thing, regardless as to what it is. So you have those aspects. And then another aspect that I feel like is an issue now that I'm really wanting to change within academia is the fact that even though we all teach culture as music teachers, we don't actually teach the culture, we teach notes in the academic construct.
Yeah.
And so as a result, what happens is that we don't even stop to think about where does something come from, why, what is the social, cultural influences that has made this whatever it is, in whatever style it is. I mean, I've taken a gazillion courses in all of my degrees. I've taken a gazillion courses on European classical music and romantic music, but I don't ever remember hearing about the culture other than the performer, what their compositions were, but nothing about, well, how did his surroundings or her surroundings influence what made this composer who they are. So, I feel like that's so far removed from pedagogy that it's going to be even more difficult to include demographics that were historically moved out of the conversation, out of the narrative, So yes, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be people that don't agree with this framework because they've been taught and conditioned to not. Right? And as
painful truth.
Yeah.
That is painful truth to hear, Trineice. Anyway, the way you just said that really hit me very hard.
But it is, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you for being willing to say, ouch. Wow, that I can see the validity in what you just said and how that, versus the defense of saying, no. But I give this analogy a lot. I think it's like the women's suffrage movement. We have turned into career power moms, right? Because there was such a tradition of you can't do what boys can do, right? So that we had to be like, no, I can do what boy can do, and everything else You know what I mean? So it becomes, there's so much of an aggressive, like, no, we are a part of this. We are part of this. This is what we did. This is what, it seems so in your face because it was so left out of the narrative that we have to be like, hey, guess what? You know, this is what you know, you guys are ignoring me. You're ignoring me. And you guys being academia, right? You guys being the systemic thinking, the systemic mindset, right? So, you know, it's just a part of this cultural rebalancing that I'm hoping is happening not only in this season, but that's going to continue to move forward.
Do you feel like there's a little step forward in the last, I don't know, 2 years, 10 years, 6 months?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a step forward because conversations are being made. You know, there are more intention, whether or not they're manifesting as efficiently as it could or quickly as it could. I mean, as soon as you think, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm sharing this with you, as soon as you think that, oh no, it's going well because you're in the circle, you're in this DEI circles, and I have my allies, and I have people that are like ready to say, no, let me help propel the truth. Let me help prepare a more diverse narrative, right? Then I just got contacted by, and I had to call Alison on this one. I got contacted by a graduate student overseas. I'm trying to not put the country on blast, but from overseas who was trying to do a gospel thesis, and their advisors stated that belting is just Black screamers, and you can't be taught. White people can't belt because they're not built to do it. And I mean, like, it was one of those things that I was like, wait.
It was a eugenics argument.
I was like, wait. I mean, it was so crazy, and I was like, this is okay. Let me get out of my bubble.
But these eugenics arguments are being used. They're still, you know, well, I was talking to one of my mentors, Kate Fraser-Neely, and you know, she was talking about one of the things that some things that we could talk about, and we were talking about chest voice. And whenever I bring up chest voice, it becomes a political conversation, a registration that is like your left hand and your right hand is somehow a political conversation. So when I bring things up, it becomes, well, we don't, if somebody doesn't want to sing chess and they don't have to, what? If you're a professional teacher, if you're a teacher, isn't what it is that you're paid for to teach the voice? You know,
yeah.
And why are we getting so angry about the chest voice? And that comes from our history of saying that the deeper voices is devilish, or it's overtly sexual.
Oh, I've never heard these things.
Oh, it's overtly sexual. It is vulgar. I heard actually just recently, well, all that music is it's just screaming and grunting and all of these things. And it's kind of like, just because this music is speech pattern based.
Mm-hmm.
It is speech pattern based. And since it is speech pattern based, how you speak is how we sing in Black American music styles. And you can see it in bossa nova and samba. You can see it in salsa. You can see it in reggae. You can see it in jazz, in zydeco, in gospel, in R&B. It's all speech based. And
I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but I guess the way, that's one of the reasons why I've always been talking about folk derived, because folk music of any culture sounds like the culture, right? The folk music of any culture sounds like the people in that culture, right? And you're musicking those things. And I think that, you know, coming back to our to what we really want to talk about and really want teachers to know in terms of Black American voice pedagogy is what parameters or what are those things do you need to consider that you may not have considered because it might not have been a part of what you've grown up with, or what, it's a part of the social cultural space that you may have grown up or been exposed to.
Right. So before we dive into music ideas, specific pedagogic, I have just a couple more follow-up questions. And there's a question from an attendee. What they say, what about American music like, does that say Rick, that came from Native American tribes? And then they say, see the Indians that rocked the world documentary. So I've never heard that come into a conversation in this context. So do you have a response to that?
I don't have much response because I don't know as much about it. But I do know that Native American music plays a role in American music as well.
Okay.
The interesting thing that this is something that's been coming up, particularly with Native American music and jazz and Native American music and the diaspora, in a lot of conversations that I've been in. And one of the things that I feel is neglected is that African Americans as an ethnicity group is a combination of many cultures. I talk about my mom's in genealogy. Like that's been her retirement project.
Yeah, to say she's retired, doesn't
she? Is, and I'm telling you, she can trace everything. And for those that have done genealogy and you get your report and you get these maps that talk about percentage, all this, and you sit there, you look, and like I look at my DNA maps and like, wow, my DNA looks like is the slave trade map. Mm-hmm. My DNA is the slave trade map. Let me just draw the circles. Let me just draw. Oh, right. So, and I'm saying that to say that Black American music is a result of the process, right? It's a result of this collective memory. It's a result of the different influences that have adapted into its own thing. So, depending on the region, depending on the time of the migrations, depending on the time of the conquerors, you are going to get all of these different influences that are apart. But I think what's missing, or what is very specific to the African American, not just cultural memory, but the particular struggle, is that there are certain parameters that are upheld and are seen as its own thing. Particularly, which I'm finding even more as I go back, and I was like, oh no, this is specifically African, this is specifically African. And then I go to my African brothers and sisters and they say, oh, well, we were colonized too. So we've been looking at you guys to see how do you sing gospel. We've been looking at you guys to see how do you do these particular things. There's something quite unique about this adaptation. So yes, does it include, I believe it includes Native American, it includes Irish, it includes Scottish. Why? Because of the way the migration, European migration, was brought to. There were more Scottish people in the South than it was in the North. So yes, there's going to be certain influences, but they won't be exactly the same, but there will be similarities. So I think sometimes, again, that in order to say, yes, the Black American contribution, it is how African slaves came to this country and adapted to their surroundings and brought and created something new. Created a thing.
I don't want to be demeaning to the question, but a lot of times when you get a question like, well, what about this? Well, that, with respectfully, we're talking about Black American music, with all due respect. And if we were talking about Native American music, when we have some Native people that can come and talk about that. But to kind of inject that, that's when you get the, well, you got to listen to me. You got to listen. That's when you get that, because a lot of times that has been the argument of, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? Rather than just dealing with, this is what Black American music is. This is how it has influenced things. This is where it comes from. Let's discuss that. And
Okay.
then next time we can discuss this as well. And we don't have to be exclusionary in spouting what it is that we are talking about at this moment. We can talk about that at another time, respectfully.
And before we get into the music, I have one more question because I think a lot of people want to know. So let me just read a question that is separate. The description in this chat states, to really understand a singer's use and approach to the various sounds and style characteristics found in Black American folk-based music, one must understand the culture the music represents, which is what we've been talking about. So it seems that one should understand both culture of Black Americans and the Black American music, folk music traditions. So are there resources? So those are two different, wheels. Are there resources that you can send us?
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Where you said that what were you considering two separate things?
The culture itself, and then the music that evolves out of that culture. I
think they're actually combined.
Yes.
You know, so which is a good thing, which makes it, and I say that because Black American music has always been a reflection of what is going on within the culture. It's always been a synonymous mode of expression from slavery to today, that it's always talking about, culture, which is why going backwards, we were saying going into the music, because it's not structured, you can separate the notes from the culture. Then it becomes problematic when you're inserting it into a pedagogic system that separates the notes from the culture.
Got it.
So that is one of the things, a part of, again, the slave songs all the way into Reconstruction, all the way down through the migrations, the stories, the songs, the way that you're singing, the why, that's Alison's big thing. The why you're singing, the why you're improvising, the why you're doing these things are all a result of you dealing with what it means to be Black in America. And I say that in that way, wanting to make sure that this is such a funny line, because a lot of times, and when you read particular resources on like cultural responsive teaching or cultural and linguistic responsive teaching, which is where my head has been in the last couple of years, as I'm trying to strategize basically, well, what is this pedagogy? What does this mean? What does it mean to be culturally responsive within music? So my brain is in those resources. But one of the most important things is that they're teaching to separate ethnicity per se from a cultural behavior, right? So just because you identify as a Black American, it doesn't necessarily mean that you share the same cultural experiences. It doesn't mean that, and I have to be careful with that, because everybody's not raised in a Baptist church or a Kojic, which is Church of God in Christ church. You know what I mean? So let's be sensitive to those things, in the same way that there are plenty of people from outside of that identify as Black American that have been raised and consumed by the culture that, you know what I mean? So wanting to be very specific in terms of saying, well, we're talking about this particular culture, and it's a generalization as it relates to this social economic demographic, as it relates to this regional demographic, as it relates to this religious demographic. You know what I mean? There's so many pillars to that have to be considered, even though we're talking about this very, very broad thing. I just got to put that disclaimer out.
That is so important. Thank you for that. And to that end, are there I know we've talked about that there aren't resources. Are there any resources whatsoever? We've addressed it, the NATS series of music books.
Right.
Would you
I
like?
think, yeah, I think, these conversations that you're narrating, right now, that you're providing these platforms for these discussions, the conference coming up, a lot of the NATS conference, for those that have not made their ticket plans and registration plans, make sure you register for the NATS conference. That's in Chicago. So there's platforms that are being developed to start sharing this information. And the trick or the challenge is that it's not that, as Alison had mentioned before, the sources don't exist. The challenge is that you have to know where to go to find it. It's just like as I'm teaching, pedagogy, you have to know when you're researching older material that press phonation, you have to notice that's a keyword, press phonation or flow phonation when you're researching, because some scholars don't use, some scientists don't use chest register, or it's called mode in some, in other countries. So I'm saying that to say that a lot of the materials that you will find the answers about culture are in ethnomusicology, right? They're in all these musicology databases, and they're built around the social aspect, the social cultural development, migrations, all of these different things. And what we're needing now, what I've really been focusing on in my own writing and research, is how do I bring these aspects, these readings that are there, and merge them into what we know about applied pedagogy? What do we know about teaching and why? How do we develop the why for the music that we're going to teach, based upon the literature that does exist, and which are the best books to go to? What are your go-to books? Making sure that people know the James Cone collection, whether it's the spiritual, what's it called? Spiritual. I'm looking back at my bookshelf, or the African American music. That's another great resource that Portia Maltby and Melanie Burnham edited. It's actually in its second edition, and it has a great resources in that sense. The James Cone, there's a Floyd, there's a lot of resources for those that wish to understand it more from ethnomusicology standpoint, that really talks about the music. Blues people, Leroy Jones book, that's really specific. I'll have to send you a bibliography, Kari, so you can just put it. But
That would be great.
right, but so there are a lot of things that exist, dissertations that are being written but not necessarily shared. So and I think that's the challenge. We don't, like, as Kari was saying today, like, everybody, we're always so busy. Like, how many things can I possibly, try to synthesize by the end of the week, right? So it's going to take us, as we're learning, to just start writing and sharing, providing these easier platforms that people can just tune in and cook dinner and listen to the NATS chat as we talk about culture. So these are the things that are going to be important for people to just kind of be like, oh, when's the next NATS chat? When is the next podcast?
Just really quickly,
Yes.
because that's coming from an academic perspective. And as I've been a part of the academic world, I'm a part of the performing world. And having some understanding, just listen to the radio. Listen to the music. Listen to hear what's going on. No, like, just if you go to YouTube, we didn't have this. We did not have YouTube years ago, and we had to go and look. But how you learn Black music is to listen. It's an oral tradition. It's an oral and an oral tradition. So you have to listen to the music. So if you want to learn about belt, go listen to some belters. And if you want to learn how to riff, you have to listen to the riffers. If you want to learn how to improvise, and Black music is improvised music at all times. Everything is improvised all the time.
But this is where, and this is how me and Alison be talking back and forth in our normal life, you know, but this is where I think it's our duty to help put it in context. Because I think what happens, the challenge with people from outside or inside within the culture, when they're listening, sometimes they don't know what it is that they're listening for. They don't know
Well,
what is
that,
different. You
so
know,
that,
they're like, I know it's something, but I can't quite articulate it, you
well,
know?
that's the thing. And but the thing that I find is that you have to start, if you have to start someplace. So, our job is to say, and I was just saying this, you want to listen to Belt where it's a little easier to kind of get in. Well, listen to Dionne Warwick, and this is where you go. And these are the things that you can listen to. So when I was getting ready to do a show and I'm like, I need to work on this daggum call sound and I need to work on this. So I just started listening to Dionne Warwick, and with my voice teacher's ear and the knowledge of what it is that I'm listening to, I was like, that's what she's doing. Got it. I understand. And so really, I really do, though it is important for us to be, for Trineice and I and other people who are out here to be able to disseminate the information about how this works and how, so you can process it easier. It is also endemic upon the person to just listen to the music, listen to how people speak, listen to see how people move. This is a movement-oriented music. I always say in the Black community, we don't care unless you drop it like it's hot. So if you can't drop it like it's hot, wow, that's how we feel stuff, really honestly. And it's in every music. If you can drop it, if it feels good, then it's going to, then we're going to start sitting with it. And that you'll see, like this is where TikTok and Instagram and all these different people who are going on and starting to talk about how Black music styles are done and to dissect them. I'm thinking of Eric Arsenault. I'm thinking of, what is it, J Hair Studios on Instagram and TikTok. That they're talking about these things coming from our perspectives. And those resources of starting to just listen and just look, then you'll start to see and to start understanding that if you want to learn, I said again, if you want to learn how to riff, you don't go to Adele first. Don't go there first. Go to who she listened to. Go to the people. If you like Justin Timberlake, go to who he listened to, which is Michael Jackson and Marvin Gaye. If you like Amy Winehouse, well, go to Dinah Washington and Little Jimmy Scott. Well, you have to kind of know these things, and that's where we come in. That's
exactly right.
However, if you want to hear where they'll talk, you'll go into interviews and they'll say, I listen to boom, 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 boom. Go there. Go there.
All right. I love that. I love that. I have to ask this question that Lily has sent in. She said, I love that Trineice mentioned that we should ask the why of learning Black American music. Could you speak a little bit to the idea of appreciation versus appropriation of Black music and culture?
Yeah, actually, my NATS conference is going to be on cultural appreciation. It's called Cultural Appropriation, Appreciation, and Adaptation, Understanding the Continuum. So, again, understanding the continuum and understanding what each of these levels of recognition mean. What Alison says it best: appropriation is issue when it becomes monetized. Right?
Nobody cares if everybody's making money and everybody got the recognition.
Right. So what I talk about, real briefly, is appropriation is what I call cultural approximation. Like you're approximating what you think this culture is based upon your very limited knowledge of what it is. We do this all the time with all kinds of, it's just a part of our That's a part of our development. There's going to be, oh, this is my surface level understanding of what this is. This culture that's not like mine is. I like it. I'm intrigued, right? And then moving into an appreciation is when you become a lot more versed and experienced in the culture by the people, with the history, with the why, if you will. And then adaptation becomes that kind of final phase that in which you understand not only the different cultures, but you've included it into your being. You've adapted it. It's become a part of who you are and what you do, right? So there are different levels that we do for every single style of music that we listen to, every single culture that we listen to. You know, I don't know, even though I can make the sounds, right? I can follow the rules of classical music. I'm not going to, I'm not Daryl Taylor. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about how to do how to make these sounds within this context for these particular repertoire, right? I'm not George Shirley, right? I'm not going to make these sounds and claim that I know how to, not only that I know how to do it, but this is the way it's really supposed to go. And that's what happens in Black music. In other music styles, that they'll take a certain aspect and then say, I am an authority on this. And you're like, wait, what?
Yes. So I did it. That's that box braids versus cornrows, kale versus collard greens kind of argument that Black people get really angry about. And
right.
So the why, I started asking last year, the why do we improvise, since it's so, and because everybody wanted to ask, well, how do you riff and how do you scat and how do you do this? Well, when you take away, as Trineice says, the functionality of the community outside of just the notes, well, the riffing and improvising and scatting, that comes from the why of the let the spirit move you-ness of Black music, of how we moved, as Trineice eloquently put it, through migration and migrational patterns, and how slavery occurred, how Reconstruction occurred, what was going on, also the linguistics of what's happening. And so this music comes, as we said before, music comes from how we speak and the rhythm of how we speak. So understanding the rhythms of what is going on, and that these improvisational tools come from listening from various different sources and putting them together at the moment. So so when you start taking one slice and then saying, yes, I saw somebody again on YouTube was like, oh, well, here's how you riff, and oh, you can do oh. I'm like, no, sweetie, that
always gets to me, because I don't mean to. I mean, everybody has their own process for understanding, and there are a lot of people that have like, oh, I understand how to sing these notes, and I don't understand how to sing these rhythms, right? And oh, it's just this thing, and I'm always saying it's not the notes. It's not the notes. I keep, oh yeah, I just learned the scale. Now it's not the notes. You can sing any notes. It's not the notes. And they're like, well, I don't understand what you mean. There's a whole nuance. There's a whole why that goes to where it's placed and why it's placed and what it's supposed to do, what response it's supposed to get from the listener, so it ends up being minimized. It ends up being minimized to notes and rhythm.
The process is minimized. Yes.
Sorry, finish your. I'm so sorry, Alison.
No, that's okay. It's to it. I was just trying to kind of add on to what Trineice was saying. There's a whole process. I just did a workshop about singing ballads and how to sing a jazz ballad, because that is something that people have difficulty figuring out how that works. And I start off with rhythm, because African culture comes from that drum, and the drum and speech work together. They are synonymous. So the instrument is the singer, and the singer is the instrument, which really is the speaker is the instrument, and the instrument is the speaker. They are the same. So when you understand that cultural context, also the emotion of what is going on, the riffing being a sigh, a moan. Trineice did a wonderful class that I went to years ago that I was like, oh my goodness, yes, that's everything. We already know this information, but to codify
to codify it.
And so, you know, it's a moan, it's a release of energy. So for example, the blues is a transformational music. It is a psychologically transformational music where you are able to take an injustice that you cannot change, that you have to deal with, and you transform it through singing this music or playing this music with yourself or generally with others, communally, and you transform it into something that you can handle and have joy with and have I have gotten over. So how I got over, there's your riff. That, you know, that's not, that's, you don't, it doesn't, you don't say over her. Okay, those are the notes. No, over.
One more time slower. Do it one more time slower. I'm just playing.
No, that's not how it works. So I was teaching at Shenandoah, and I was talking about Whitney Houston, and I think about Whitney Houston as a jazz singer who comes from a gospel R&B background. So she does things like a jazz singer. So I'm like, oh, this is great. And I was saying, you know, we don't always start off with these big things. And we when she does her riffs and does her things, she just blew out, because that's what she feels at the moment. So Trineice always commonly talks about composer-led versus individually led. And understanding, so these are the whys. These are the whys. So so if it is composer-led, everything is told to you. So your creativity comes in your interpretation of what the composer wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the hardest thing for me when I was in school. Mm-hmm. That was the hardest thing to understand when I was studying with a classical teacher, which a fabulous classical teacher at that. Mind you, shout out to Marianne Harpo, Indiana University, Bloomington. So it's, you know, okay, all my Hoosiers. So, you know, the challenge was not what she was teaching. The challenge was, number one, I didn't understand how to connect it to what I was doing. And then the second part that I had a challenge with was understanding that I had to do what somebody else told me to do. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, wait, you mean I can't do that? I remember Paul Keesgan when he was living. He was the chair at the time, and I was singing for him. Now, mind you, he came to all of my jazz stuff because he was a jazz fan, blah blah blah. But I was singing for him some stuff that I had worked out, and he said, you know, kind of in this, like he wanted to say, you know, I love you, right? But he goes, you sound like Sarah Vaughan singing Schubert. He said, which some people would like, but it won't necessarily work in the doctorate program. I remember thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? That was so confusing to me. Like, I don't understand. But it was because, culturally speaking, everything, when we talk about spirituals, I keep going back to spirituals and understanding the everything is improvised. Everything is improvised. So what the sheet music is, when sheet music occurred, was the jump off point. It's the point of starting. You know, it was like, this is the map. This is an idea of how the tune goes. But your responsibility is to bring life to it, and so to have that mentality, and to be raised in the church and be raised singing in that way, and then studying jazz and understanding, oh, okay, yes, I fit into this world, but then try to, you know, sing something from Carmen and be like, wait, I can't do that. I don't. More so, I was like, why can't I? Well, that's just not what we do. That's just not how it goes. I mean, you know, and then so that's what propelled all of the research. That's why I'm so into this whole reorganization of pedagogy. This whole, well, let's me consider, and I give that credit to Jeannie LeVetri. That's why she's been my major mentor. Even while I was doing my doctorate research, but she was my major mentor. Why? Because she thought like an independent teacher. She said to me when I was studying and I was going through all these books, she was like, stop trying to make a pedagogy something fit it into something that it's not. You know, she was like, I don't know what it is. That's your job. That's why you're going through these books. And that's why, but your job is to say, well, we know that this model doesn't fit. So your job is to figure out what is the model that fit and why, and how do you teach it? And that has really propelled my last, 14 years of doing this research and doing this. And that's why I happen to be so passionate about it and be like, well, oh, okay, I'm still evolving. I'm always evolving. Every time I find something, I'm telling you about it. If I find this, I'm gonna tell you about it because it takes a long time. Sorry.
I love that. No, I love that, Trineice. I love it. And I have to say, part of what I'm finding comforting in what you're saying is, I'm sorry there was a struggle in that. Wait, you want me to do not me led, but composer led? Because as a classically trained person, right? It's like, you want me to do what? Like it's not on the page, handled, wrote out my ornamentation. I mean, you're right.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Follow that. I know how to shape it in a Baroque style or in a bel canto style, those ornaments, but you want me to like free flow and
Yeah.
well, and then they call it noodle. I heard the word noodling. I'm like,
yes.
oh, we're noodling. I don't noodle.
I know. Well, and it's so funny. And when I talk to my classical colleagues that are steeped in this tradition and they're conditioned to interpret what's on the page, that it is scary, right? But then recognizing when you're teaching in a more diverse body of students that may not be coming from a background, this is again going back to this culturally, linguistically responsive teaching as applied to music, the article that's not written yet, but it's working it out. When I get all my research together, I'm gonna write it. But anyways, but one of the things that I find excellent about this is they use VAB. They use this acronym in this pedagogy, that stands for validate, affirm, build, and bridge. And so when you do that from the standpoint, then you can sit there, you can say, oh, I understand why you're having trouble adding these different elements to, and that's wonderful. Now, within this context, what you're doing is great, and we're going to find some different styles that will help you accentuate that. But in this context, let's talk about how you would relate or transfer what it is that you're doing. That's the building the bridge part. Instead of the assumption like, no, we don't do it that way. I mean, not that, my teacher said, no, we don't do it. They said we don't do it that way. But in other words, instead of leaving it at that, like, no, we don't do it that way. And that's it. And I say that even to jazz singers that are teaching R&B. I mean, R&B singers that are starting to learn with a jazz singer, because there's always that, oh, well, we do this, and oh no, you're making this to R&B, or you're making this up, you know what I mean? So I think there's a particular pedagogic strategy that we need to use when we're crossing different expected behavior, culturally viable behaviors within the context of a musical style. I'm sorry, Alison be telling me, like, Trineice, sometimes you don't have to use big words to just say something. I'm like, okay, I apologize. I have these moments, but because I'm always in my writing brain sometimes when I'm talking about this. But
we love it. We love every minute. Alison, so tell me, is it possible for this middle-aged white gal, right, who does not have the same cultural experience to understand what all this that you're talking about, to teach it? Like, I could never live it the way you two do and teach it the way you do. But is there a place?
Of course. I mean, for example, I mean, I took classical music. I'm a classically trained singer. So I learned and I'm a classically trained pianist. So I learned these things. And I learned all of the standards and practices up to a certain point. So I can teach it up to a certain point. So you can, that's where you do your professional development, and you can learn that. That's why you learn you learn the rhythms. When Trineice was talking about, oh, there's the differences, when R&B singers are trying to learn how to sing jazz and they sound too R&B or they sound too blah, 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 learning that there are differences.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
that learning the central focus of where it comes from, and that all of these art forms are doing essentially the same types of things, but then learning the unique differences of each one. So if you have a gospel person coming to you, then you're probably going to be doing things that are high energy. You're going to be doing
unless
more
it's devotional.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, but
so it's like I don't go to church as much as I used to.
I'm saying,
but in terms of, it's like, but if you're going, so let me say, if you're going to be doing jazz, well, which kind of jazz? Are you going to be doing more blues-oriented jazz? Or are you going to be doing more or a lighter version, an Esperanza Spalding kind of thing? Or are you going to do a more soul version? What are you going to be doing? If you're going to be doing hip hop, do you understand the rhythms of these things and how they deal with those things? If you're going to be teaching Toni Braxton kinds of material, or understanding and knowing these singers, the way that we teach is by listening and saying, it's like that'll learn you. So understanding that, like being able to say that colloquialism, you don't necessarily have to say that colloquialism, Kari, but hey, I went to Alison's class at Shenandoah. I went to Trineice's class, Soul Ingredients. And this is what they said to do. And here, this is my best approximation of what this is. My best approximation of what this is, but I may not be able to sing it as well. I've learned how to riff far better than I did years ago. I am not a riffing singer, but I can do it, and I can do it pretty well because I learned enough. And then I started doing it in my own singing and my own performing as well, more so. And
wait till you hear me rap. I'm telling you, I'm coming up. I'm coming up as the next MCs.
Girl. But it's so you start when you start understanding these things, and then you can just go and say, well, if you want to hear this, if you want to learn this thing, let's go listen to this singer. I learned this from, and then you go down that YouTube rabbit hole, and you start hearing all of these different things, and your music educator ear will be able to say, because you have that knowledge. Just because you're coming into something new doesn't mean that you're coming in as a baby completely. You're coming in as maybe as a 5-year-old, who can kind of come in and learn this stuff.
Something that I just want to add to that too is, for me particularly, my goal, and I feel like my purpose in my pedagogic journey, in just really developing strategies, is that if the standard pedagogy for academia is centered solely right now, that's what we're trying to evolve from. If it's centered solely from an elite European classical music approach, in which we're thinking about very quantifiable parameters, right, first, and then the musicality will stem from that. Like if that is the default, then what I hope to bring or to make more apparent or more accessible is the shift in mindset to, well, what would happen if there is another aspect of recognizing emotional expression first? What is the shift if your sound basically grew out of your normal emotive expression? What does that mean? What does that sound like? And how does it manifest itself in the style of music? Because I think that in all CCM styles, individuality is what's most important. Individuality is key. And as a result, then how are we changing and adjusting the pedagogy so that these quantifiable measures have a little bit more balance towards qualifiable. And we're saying, we're acknowledging you're wonderfully made. I always say that, but acknowledging that your voice, how do we make your voice shine? How do we make what you have to say shine, regardless of the styles that you're singing? And how do we bring that into the different music? So that's my, more so in vocal pedagogy, in Black American music vocal pedagogy, I'm really wanting to capture and just bring some sort of light to the different ways that we can integrate these philosophies into standard voice pedagogy. And it's not delimited, but we just know, oh, this is coming from this cultural belief system or philosophical way of music making. And, you know, and you hear this in African American art song, you know, where you're hearing this kind of adaptation and you're like, oh, there's something different about it. Well, what is it different? What is different? Well, it's going to be an approach. It's going to be that cultural memory that is interjected into what it is that you're doing and how you're expressing yourself, regardless of the style that you're singing. So that's my pedagogic prayer to say.
I love that. We have a wonderful question that I think I oftentimes in versions of this think of, so I'm going to share it. And this person says, do other ethnicities have permission to sing Black American rap that it was originated by or intended for African American artists? Example, Summertime from Porgy and Bess, or I'm Here from The Color Purple. This question comes up all the time.
All the time.
All the
time.
And I heard a fantastic answer a couple years ago at a NATS conference, and the answer was, if you feel it, if you have something to say with it, sing it. Is that how you both feel?
Well, I had to evolve. I evolved. So in the beginning of my young career, I was like, no, you not. A white person cannot sing a spiritual, no. And you will not understand how it feels, and it doesn't sound right, and blah, 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 blah. Then I started having students who were coming to me from high schools who were saying because their directors were doing spirituals because they wanted to do a diverse group of music, and so they would do spirituals in their choir. They would come to me and they'd be like, okay, I have to do this. And so I'd have to get myself prepared to do this. And then I started looking, I was like, well, if you're learning the material and you're understanding the standards and practices of it, well, I mean, I could sing classical, so why can't you sing a spiritual? Then I started seeing more and more. I saw a wonderful concert at the National Cathedral. I'm in the DC metropolitan area. And it was, I don't remember the name of the choir, but it was a white choir doing a very, very beautiful spirituals concert. And close your eyes and you would not know the ethnicity of the singers because they had steeped themselves in the tradition and were able to sing it where I felt like, oh, well, this is the music like anybody else from any other culture does. So I evolved and I just started saying, well, you know, why not sing it? Sing it if you want. And if you want to teach it, as long as you're coming from a place where you know where the history is and you know the culture, why not? So that also talks about appropriation again versus appreciation. Because Black music has an outsized footprint on world music today. It's very difficult to not have not African music, Black American music be the stamp of what is popular in many countries around the world. You wouldn't have K-pop without Marvin Gaye and Michael Jackson, Boyz II Men. Because the producers of Boyz II Men were the people who went over to Korea to create that. So it's more about, again, who's making the money, who gets the power, and who gets to be creative. So that's more of anybody can do anything, but appropriation is more about what Trineice was talking about in terms of who is who is benefiting, who is getting, who gets to tell their story more.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets that? I get frustrated that many of our R&B singers right now are white. I get frustrated not because they're white, but because there's so many Black people who are doing it who are not getting the same recognition. I don't care that Adele does what she does. She's great. Who cares? But what about another singer who happens to not be white, who's British, who could sing the same, like Lauren Volla? Why not? Why is she not at the same level doing orchestrally based R&B music and church music? Who is Nigerian British? That is where the appropriation comes in for me. Sing what you want, and we can all sing together, because that's how humanity creates culture, by doing different things from other cultures and making it their own.
Well, and this is where I go back to really wanting the philosophy of seeing who you are, seeing what are the stories you want to tell. Why are you telling them? I just got finished doing a voice workshop center, in London, and we were talking about this very thing, because they have quite a bit of CCM programs, and they're teaching R&B, and they're teaching all this, and they were like, there's no cultural representation. So I think there's a lot of approximation going on, and I said, well, and there's like, the question was, how do you address it in your studio? How do you address it? And I said, well, most of the time, it doesn't get that far, because there's so many other parameters that we're selecting repertoire based on, in the sense of, what is your story? Who are you? What do you want to say? What is it that you feel? So if I'm assigned a spiritual, right? Or if I want to be assigned an African-American art song or whatnot, I'm looking at the text first. Is this a story that I can connect to? So that goes to the why. Like, how do you address the why? I'm singing this because I have been in despair. I know what it means to overcome. Overcoming is not a racial limitation, right?
That's why the blues became popular.
So these are the things that I recommend. So in other words, if someone wants to sing Summertime, and they break that music down, and they understand historically what the context, and they say, no, this is my story and why, then it becomes, that's what I'm calling Black music pedagogy, if you will. I mean, because it's beyond voice, right? I taught a class in Princeton about doing this, and it was like improvisation and interpretation. And I let them sing whatever they wanted, whatever style they wanted. But it was, pick a song of suffrage, pick a song of I stand for something. And then the third segment was I'm wonderfully made. I didn't care what they brought, but the concept was, I want you to learn music based on, this is what I'm singing the song, because this is my story too. And I can tell this story, and because I can tell the story, I can elaborate on what else I'm going to say, hence the improvisation aspect. My voice is going to come out, my passion is going to come out because I believe it, versus I'm going to give you this music because this is the range, and I just want to give you a random piece that's going to make your tongue and articulator do different things that is not outside of your normal dialect, right?
Great answers. And Alison, I really appreciate you sharing how your thinking, your response to such a question has evolved. I just think that is, thank you for sharing that. It's really brilliant. You are both so wonderful. I just so appreciate this conversation. Are there any final thoughts you have for our NATS teachers? Any things that we haven't covered that you really want to make sure that we leave with the knowledge of?
I think, Alison, what you should, like I told you, me and Alison talk all the time. And one of the things that I feel like, I felt like coming into this, I'm like, takeaways are important to me. And I think Alison really does a great job in talking about rhythm and talking about the why of rhythm. And she alluded to that a lot today. But more specifically, what kinds of strategies do we use within the teaching studio that would basically empower our students to think from another approach to music making, right? So, I'll let you go first, Alison.
Okay.
Well, I'll go also, but I'm sorry because I know you already said it, but I listened to this woman teach. I mean, she, it's so brilliant to see other pedagogues and other teachers using and talking in the way that she teaches rhythm. Like if you ever take a live class from her, and particularly the way that she teaches you how to teach jazz and rhythm to kids, it's like so, but but what I would suggest, one of the things that I would suggest is basically number one, what I just said about picking the repertoire differently and creating your exercises, even down to your warm-ups, even down to if I'm singing a 5-note scale, what would happen if I added words and I asked the student to add them? And just give me a five sentence. How do you feel today? I am very tired. I am very tired. I just want to eat. Right? Why? Because it just breaks the mold of saying, I have something to say, and even if it doesn't seem significant at this moment, I'm valid. I'm tired. You know what I mean? And it starts to nourish that, oh, I'm not going to wait for you to give me something to do because you are almighty and you know what's best for my voice, and which we do. I mean, don't get twisted, right? We do know, but it's more so, how do we get our students and facilitate their learning so that they feel just as valid and just as justified in their development, and they feel like I'm a part of it. I'm in control too. I know why I'm doing this exercise, and I know how to immediately put it into the context of this song instead of these are my exercises and this is my song.
Yes.
So music making, developing, improvisation, putting that into the learning process from the jump.
Yeah, I actually started doing that actually after taking your class, and in terms of just like you only have so much time, because we really a lot of times only have an hour, and so especially in teaching jazz, I've got to teach chart writing, because if you don't understand theory, that's how we talk. That's how we talk. You have to understand that, and you have to understand the roadmap. And so I'm also teaching technical things. So one of the things, starting to feel, just doing your regular exercises with just
Right.
time
The
and
rhythm, right?
groove underneath it. It does not have to be some very complex groove underneath. It can just literally be this feeling.
Right.
And that's it. Or if you're feeling this kind of groove underneath what's happening, your vocalizations will match that. And so you're starting to feel the groove in your body, because since this is a community-based music, we are all in the drum chorus, and that's what I've been in, the drum orchestra of music. The great Barry Harris used to say singers are drummers also. And so understanding just that basic pulse, just starting with that, and then teaching the feeling of the quarter note, the feeling of the eighth note, and the feeling of the triplet against the duple. Those different things. These are putting that into your exercises so that that are simple, that are your warm-up exercises, perhaps not your vocal teaching exercises
Right.
necessarily,
Or
unless
maybe
you
so.
They
you
could
know,
be.
unless you're starting to like, I'll start teaching when I'm starting to teach certain registration things, I'll put it in a riff way
Mm.
so that you'll understand how it is that you're actually moving from thing to thing. And so understanding that rhythm, that, you know, I was teaching what is the difference between jazz singing and or what makes this not jazz. And so being able to hear, oh, this sounds like musical theater, and it's based off of rhythm. It's the genre, rhythm gives the genre. The rhythm gives whether we're in bossa nova, if we're in bossa nova or samba, we know that we're in those things by the rhythmic pattern underneath.
Mhm.
And so understanding these rhythmic patterns as singers, and singers commonly don't know these rhythmic patterns.
Right.
Absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
day, jazz singers don't know these rhythmic patterns, and
Yeah.
they're the ones doing them the most. But
Mhm.
you know, but you know, understanding those rhythmic patterns, being able to feel them in your body, and dancing like a
Under,
Zumba class is a
yeah.
wonderful class to take. I really want to put together a dance for singers class taught by
Yeah.
school dancers, Zumba dancers, salsa dancers, all of these things, hip hop dancers, because if you feel it in your body, it will come out in your voice. And the technique actually works better when you feel the rhythm. It comes out when you feel the rhythm. And
Right.
understanding what Trineice is saying, the linguistics, that's what she's trying to do by saying, I'm feeling tired today. Bop duga up boodap. That's the rhythm. Ah
Yeah.
ah ah ah. That's a riff.
Mhm.
You
Right.
know, that's what and that's where it's coming from. And so the being able to sing it yourself. So
Mhm.
I took Ginny Levetre's classes as well. And one of the things that she really, really talked about was being the teacher being able to do it to the
Yeah,
best
that's her
of
big thing.
your ability. And
Mhm.
I don't know how to teach without singing it.
Mhm.
So do it to the best of your ability, and then show an example of it. So
In
you're doing
context.
both, and you're feeling that rhythm. We're all dancing. If we can get into that, because that's the cultural feeling. So when I want to sing classical music, I have to get into that cultural rhythmic feeling for me in order to be able to do it. And I start moving this way. My body looks different. How I hold myself looks different. And if I'm getting ready to sing jazz and I'm like, or I'm going to be doing something like this is where my body goes. Okay. So, like, those are the things pedagogically that we can start getting ourselves into dance movement, into understanding rhythm and call and response and how that works.
Yeah.
All of those types of things, the cultural ways of doing this, getting out of the Eurocentric way of teaching it and coming from an Afrocentric way of teaching it.
What
And
a
that is through listening to other people. That
Mhm.
is, you don't have anything to say if you've never said anything. Babies don't know how to talk unless their parents talk to them. So the understanding of transcription and listening and copying, but then understanding that after that transcription, you've kind of got to throw it out and still learn the music. So
Mhm.
my thing is, this music is like macaroni and cheese. You can make macaroni and cheese any way you want to make it. You could put Gouda in it, you could put mozzarella in it, you could put some ham in there, some cheddar, you could put bacon. Don't put blueberries, that would be wrong. But you know, but you could put whatever you want to put in it. But if you take away the noodles, which is the melody, and understanding that, then all you have is cheese sauce. You must know the melody in order to have something to improvise upon.
Mhm.
And so that these are the paradoxical way of teaching, of that the words are important, but they're not important. But they are important, but they're not important. But they
Because
are.
the emotion
But the emotion
is
is important.
what you're articulating.
Is what you're doing.
It's the
So
strongest.
the vibe is important, how it feels. All of those things, getting into that headspace when you're getting ready to teach music from this background helps you to be able to teach it in a way that is authentic to the best of your ability.
Mm.
That's really all that we're asking.
Thank you. This has been so informative and inspirational, from talking about the cultural context to the nuts and bolts. And I just thank you for honoring us tonight with this chat, because I think we just have to keep moving this conversation forward. There's much work still to be done, but we're doing our best. So thank you
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much for including it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the attendees for joining us. This will, as always, be up on our official YouTube NATS channel. And I will get that resource list from Trineice and have that also up there. And please, if you're not a Facebook NATS chat group member, please join. And I'll be working on next season's NATS chat over this summer, and hopefully have another wonderful season planned for everyone next year. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful summer. Continue to be safe. And I hope to see many of you in Chicago in July.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you again, Alison and Trineice. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care.